And we are back. Welcome back. We have some great stories for you tonight. This is fun. We have some stuff here in Virginia with the budget. We have some national politics, even some international politics today. So let's just jump right into it. But before we get started, I just wanted to say I am always here for you, but sometimes you guys, you're not always here for me. But I don't want you to feel bad. If you do feel bad, what you can do to make it up to me is you follow me on Facebook, on Rumble, on YouTube. And then when you talk to somebody, you find yourself in a political conversation and you say, wait a minute, hold up. I think you'd like that Vince guy that I listen to. It's Vince versus everyone, Vince vs everyone. Even if you can't catch his lives on TikTok, you can always find the lives posted on YouTube, Facebook, or Rumble, and you can leave a comment there, and he'll probably still talk about it on the show. So it's a win-win for everybody, whether you're here for the conversation live, or you can even come back later, and it might be a subject that gets featured in a short or featured in another live if it's something really thoughtful that requires more than 90 seconds to respond to. So anyway, we'll go ahead and get started. As you all know, the House and the Senate, they were able to have a consensus on the Virginia budget. So that has been posted. It's up for review right now. So you can look at it. The governor's currently looking at it. And she did inform Senator Saddam Salim from Fairfax that she will be making amendments and sending them back to the House and the Senate so that they can be approved and the budget can move forward. So in Virginia, the governor, when that budget's passed, they do have a line item veto, meaning that they get to go through the budget line by line, and they can either veto sections of it or they can make amendments to it, which would mean that the Virginia legislature would have to come back together to either accept those vetoes or to override them and send it back to the governor again. Right now, the number one thing that people are looking at, the one that the governor has confirmed, is that one of those amendments or some of those amendments she'll be sending down are related to the Virginia weapons ban. And so it's facing multiple lawsuits right now. I believe there's 4 that are part of a 3-judge panel that's convened in Henrico. And so those lawsuits about the individual's right to keep and bear arms in Virginia, which is separate from the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. In the Virginia Constitution, it's Article 1, Section 13, has a similar clause that an individual has a right to keep and bear arms. Now, you see, the police superintendent for Virginia, Colonel Katz, his counterclaim, their defense in these 4 pending lawsuits, is that it's actually not an individual's right to keep and bear arms, that that's actually a militia-tied right because of the wording in the Virginia Constitution. So it was kind of a weird approach for their defense. You know, I think this is somewhat novel. Well, it feels novel when you first hear it until you realize that this has literally been the argument around the Second Amendment like forever. The whole well-regulated militia, like, you know, shall not be infringed wasn't quite clear enough because of that militia language out front. So it's basically the exact same case, and now we're going to see how that plays out in the eyes of the Virginia Supreme Court, or at least the panel that the Virginia Supreme Court handpicked. But right now, the governor's amending the assault weapons ban with her line item vetoes. So this is a very interesting stuff. Senator Saddam Salim, he championed the bill through the Senate, Dan Helmer through the House. So they're both prepared to go back because they only have 48 hours once they receive it back from the governor to make their either acceptance or their rebuttal. And at that point, if they don't do that within 48 hours, the whole state goes into a shutdown. Basically, right now, the entire discourse online is a conversation of whether the governor is going to attempt to expand what fits the definition of assault weapon. There is criteria in the bill. It has to do with, you know, if it's a rifle or a pistol, does it have a threaded barrel? Does it have a foregrip? Does it have a telescoping stock, barrel shroud, a magazine that attaches separately from the inside of the handle for pistols specifically? So there's like this whole criterion that basically for rifles, anything that's similar to an AR-15 or AK-47, and for pistols, anything smaller than, I mean, what I would call like a concealed carry or like a purse gun. Your LCP max is safe. All of your wheel guns and revolvers, I guess those are still on the table. So it's going to be looking like the Wild West out here. People with like side-by-side barrel shotguns and revolvers, I guess, are just going to be what you're left with. So, curious to see how it plays out. But a lot of people think that she's going to expand that definition of assault weapon so that people don't try and slip things through the cracks. More likely, I think, is the counter argument that she's going to push for language that neutralizes some of the pending lawsuits. The thing is, in Virginia, the governor's not able to make amendments to a bill that she's already signed into law. And she officially did sign that bill into law as is only, like a week ago now. So it will go into effect as is on July 1st. And she's trying to neutralize parts of that legislation with her budget amendments. And I guess that's in hopes that it shuts down these lawsuits in progress. Except this is totally unconstitutional. This is completely unprecedented in Virginia. So I don't think that it's going to play out. It would make sense that she would try and do this. Except you have to look at the facts, the way that the court's going to look at this, because this budget's only going to be in effect for 2 years. So say she does this and like miraculously the judges do accept it and they toss out the lawsuit. Well, then in 2 years, that harm, that irreparable harm that the lawsuits are that they were brought forth for, well, then it happens anyway when the budget expires after 2 years. So the court is probably not going to accept this just on those grounds. It's not going to neutralize the suits. And then to make it even more complicated, that would just be her further providing testimony for the plaintiffs against the lawsuit. So you see how that works? How like that she's once again testifying against her own bill, which she did hours after the House and the Senate both had passed the bill. Within like 2-3 hours, she was on television and she says, oh, well, I do support this bill. I tried to make amendments, but they rejected the amendments, even though it targets commonly used hunting rifles. And that commonly used, that's the problem, is that Article 1, Section 13 says that the Virginia legislature, the Virginia government doesn't have a right to ban commonly used rifles. That's also part of Heller and Bruin. So we have an immense amount of precedent that says that commonly used rifles are not up for negotiation. You cannot remove them from the populace. That's basically all the Second Amendment even does at this point. And she goes out and describes the rifles as commonly used. And then now what is going to make amendments that are only going to provide more testimony? This woman herself the governor herself will likely wind up in court. Well, to be honest, they'll probably just not have her in court. They'll just have like the information and language that she offered and submit it as evidence. They won't really need her pontificating on the stand to make that case even worse. But it's like I said, it's an interesting case, but there's no way that you can use the budget to amend legislation that's already passed. It's just not happening. So very curious. But yet another piece, though, that 48 hours, right? That they only have 48 hours to approve this budget when they come back on June 29th. So the thought is that Spanberger is trying to use her position to jam her changes down on the legislature. So they have to accept it. Otherwise, they wouldn't accept these changes, except she's doing it so last minute. Except that this calculus is exactly backwards. Like similar to the U.S. like legislature, if you look at a national level, Congress always has these really, really low approval ratings, except for when under polling nationally, Congress has a low approval rating. And yet individual members tend to have decent approval ratings within their own district. The Virginia legislature fundamentally is no different. So it's it doesn't make sense to me that she's using her leverage. It's her political future that will be destroyed if the state goes into shutdown. That's going to be put on her shoulders solely. No legislature, no member of the legislature will be held accountable. Daniel, with the question, how likely do you think an injunction would happen before the first? Extremely unlikely. I mean, if you asked me a week ago, I'd say, like, there's still a chance. But, I mean, we are down to, 9 days? And, I mean, the whole reason that they put this panel of judges together was to streamline the process. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying, like, 75-25. Probably, realistically, probably less. That's me being optimistic. But the whole reason they put together the 3-judge panel is because the state Supreme Court, instead of having 4 separate lawsuits that could potentially conflict with one another, one upholding it and then another filing an injunction, they put it all together so that if this goes to appeal, the state Supreme Court only has to focus on one case, the arguments of one case and the decision that's given of one case. They don't have to try and square the circle and then otherwise just leave one judge looking like an idiot. So before the first, I think, is unlikely. Part of the reason I say that is because when we had universal background checks in Virginia, that ultimately had a permanent injunction laid on it on the grounds of it being unconstitutional, and that took 4 years. Which means that there was probably an 18, 19, or 20-year-old that had his application denied. Well, I mean, not denied. He just couldn't get a background check. And if that person was the victim of some kind of crime or home robbery, something like that, then, I mean, they were directly affected. 4 years is a long time. There were people who were 19 when that law went into effect, eventually could go through the universal background check system, and then later found out it's unconstitutional. So, unfortunately, our justice system, especially in matters like this, is not fast. They use words like irreparable harm, but I mean, really, in the long term, it's not like this. It's not like that kid's going to be able to sue, even if they wanted to. So, the hypothetical kid in this situation, I should say. But yeah, so my outlook's not great, not because I think it's right, but because I'm just trying to look at the hand that we're being dealt and how these things have happened in the past, unfortunately. But no, Spanberger's entire political future is hinged on this budget. A shutdown will squarely get blamed on her. I truly don't believe it's her fault. I mean, well, I don't know. When you talk about matters like this, is it really one person's fault? But no, the legislature has put her in this position. And now what's going to happen is that if the state does go into a shutdown, she doesn't actually have any leverage. This woman right now is in a position where realistically, and I'm not a big supporter of hers by any stretch, but realistically, this woman could be a vice presidential candidate. She could get into the U.S. Senate. She could go from Virginia governor to this United States senator. That's a huge career jump. And if the state goes into a shutdown, that will be in every single counter campaign ad against her forever. It will end her political career right here. So no, I don't think it'll happen. And I think the math is seriously working against her. But we'll see how it plays out, right? So all this talk about this gun bill, and it doesn't even make sense, right? Because the exact same people who championed this gun bill, the same people who wanted it to pass in the first 90 days of Spanberger taking office, they pushed for legislation that reduced mandatory minimums for violent offenders, including firearm offenses. So these people, they want you to be able to sue a gun shop. They want you to be able to sue gun manufacturers, but they're simultaneously turning around and people that are committing armed robbery are getting lower sentences. People that are having gun offenses, first offenses, are getting released on bail and bond, going back into the communities they're just terrorizing. It literally makes no sense. These people, this is the problem, right? The main problem that I see, and I get called a lib every single day. Like, you can go to the comment section of almost any one of my videos. It doesn't even matter. I might be saying the most hardline anti-immigration thing on the planet, and I still will get accused of being a lib every day. And at the same time, the reason why I am this way, because in my heart of hearts, I think I might actually be, but there is an intellectual consistency that comes with the right wing, and it just happens. And it's not just about what you think, it's also why you think those things. And I could do 40 minutes just on this specifically, but unfortunately this sort of like bleeding heart, like we need to have soft on crime policies, but also you should be allowed to sue a gun manufacturer makes no sense to me whatsoever. But if you had both of those things, if you said, no, we're locking up the criminals, but also we're suing the manufacturers, I could at least say, okay, well, I mean, I guess it makes sense. But you're not even doing that. So I have to doubt your motivations in this exact situation. Oh, if no injunction happens before the first, it could be a few years before the ban is taken down. Yeah, based off of precedent in Virginia, I think it could be 2, 3, 4 years before we see meaningful relief. And I mean, that being said, it took a Republican governor in the state so that we actually had the structural backing to get that to happen. I know Gun Owners of America, Virginia Citizens Defense League, they did a lot of good work, a lot of hard work to make that case happen, which is why I think it's important to be a member of organizations like this that advocate on a legal level for the things you believe in. I mean, the donation seems silly, but it does go a long way. But that being said, you have to have the structural support. And you even look at what happened within, they had that ban was struck down. The universal background checks was ended in October 2025. A Democrat takes office in January 2026, and within 90 days, Jay Jones is already trying to resume universal background checks, even though we already had the permanent injunction. Like Virginia Citizens Defense League they had a copy of a letter. They said, all of our members, anybody who's reading this, give this to your local police precinct to let them know if they knowingly, willfully violate a permanent injunction, that is contempt of court, and they can lose their qualified immunity. And I mean, that's playing hardball. Most police that I meet, the ones that I know personally, I think they're nice guys. I don't want to see these people put themselves in legal jeopardy, but unfortunately, in matters like this, it's not an easy job. I certainly wouldn't do it. What can I say? But no, I think like I said, it's a sticky situation to say the least. But moving on from Virginia, right? There's an interesting case. ICE is looking to impose a fine exceeding $250,000 on immigration attorney Vinod Dadamani, for allegedly filing false asylum claims on behalf of primarily Indian clients. So this guy, Dadamani, you try and say that 10 times fast, I dare you. So he works out of South Florida, right? For like the last 15 or 16 years. And he does a number of things, patent attorney, but he has a nationwide immigration office, his legal services for immigration. ICE alleges that this man submitted 64 fraudulent documents across 32 immigration cases. The agency is seeking a penalty of $255,000. They don't specify, is this per instance, like is this per infraction, or is this like total? Because this guy has made millions of dollars, $255,000. I say this all the time. Like, that's just a speed bump. Like, at that point, like, there's still an ROI for committing fraud. So I don't know if this is a per instance thing. That seems a little low to me. If you're talking about per instance, I mean, you could really crank those up. I mean, 64 documents across 32 cases. Well, then that's a pile of money. That would financially ruin this guy forever. But all that said, there's something I wanted to point out, right? The last case that I highlighted that was like this was in regards to a woman that was working, I think, out of Portland. And she had 32,000 clients when her firm was shut down. 32,000. That is a ton. This man, 32 cases. That's not a lot. And 255K, while that seems low, this does send somewhat of a message, right? This sends a message to basically any attorney that might be working on on one immigration case. that there are going to be some fines and some penalties. And maybe right now it's just an ROI thing. If this man intentionally committed fraud, there are legal implications. You can serve time for fraud, documents fraud. So while I say, pessimistically, I say 255K seems a little low, at the same time, this sends a message that any attorney could potentially find themselves facing pressure from the government if they chose to go outside of the law, so to speak. So it's an interesting case. It's one worth keeping up with, especially if you're in the Palm Beach area. And worth highlighting, again, tough jobs that other people wouldn't elect to do. And speaking of Florida, a citizen of the U.S. who was living in Miami recently ran and won president. He's the president-elect of Colombia, like the country. So this man, Eduardo Menoni, Eduardo Menoni shared the story. Abelardo de la Espriella is the president-elect of Colombia. This man won the most narrow runoff in the history of the country. It was like 49.25% to 48.5% against his far-left socialist opponent, right? This man is a lawyer. He used to work as a defense attorney, and he lived in Miami for, I think, like 10 years. He became a citizen in 2023. And, he was pretty high profile. He was defending people who were part of the Maduro regime. He had, let me see. I had a couple notes about this guy. Yeah, I studied law at Del Rosario University, a lawyer based in Bogota and Miami, representing controversial clients. Here we go. From the right-wing paramilitary groups, the Uribe-era demobilization process, high-profile cases involving businessmen and politicians, and worked with the Foundation for Peace Initiatives, or FIPAS, for those who really know ball, right? Represented Alex Saab, a Venezuelan businessman tied to the Maduro regime, David Marcelo Guzman, mastermind behind a major pyramid scheme. So, as far as defense attorneys go, he took on some tough cases, right? But that doesn't mean, just because you are a defense attorney, doesn't mean that you're necessarily, in favor of what your clients are doing. You're just doing a job, right? But that does also mean you get an intimate inside look at some of these organizations. You have an understanding about these things that other people don't have. So he ran for president as a hardline right-winger. People are calling him Colombia's Bukele. His campaign included building mega prisons, a 90-day military offensive against armed groups, bombing narco-terrorist camps, ending peace talks with rebels, aerial fumigation of coca crops, and strengthening the armed forces. He pledged to join the U.S.-led anti-cartel initiatives, a.k.a. the Shield of the Americas. Let's go, baby. I think it was, December? I think it was November or December. We got an announcement from President Trump about the Shield of the Americas, that all of these Latin American countries, all that are lining the Gulf of America, all locking arms, joining forces, and stopping narco-terrorism through Latin America. Now Colombia, which, you guys know about Colombia. Now they are going to be part of this as well. Talking about aerial bombing campaigns against cartel members, about aerial fumigation, destroying cocaine crops. This is massive. And when people talked about, what's-her-face, Kristi Noem, getting ousted from DHS, and now she's going to be the Shield of the Americas, even I was skeptical. I said, this woman's political career is over. They made her the head of a department that's not going to do anything for 2, 3, 4 years. Trump's going to be leaving office before anything even happens with Shield of the Americas. And what do we have? We had the head of Tren de Aragua was the victim of a drone strike last week, and now we have a Colombian president saying, yeah, we are joining Shield of the Americas day one. When I get into office, we are taking down the cocaine problem in Colombia and the U.S., and I am totally here for it. Everybody thinks it's all fun and games. That is a serious drug that ruins people's lives, and I couldn't be happier. And you know what? I think I'm gonna end that on a high note. You probably heard it here first, because I was super surprised when I saw this story. So anyway, like I said, I'm always here for you, but you're not always here for me. But that's okay. That's just fine. You go to Rumble, Facebook, or YouTube, you hit that follow button, and when you're talking to your friends about politics and you say, you know what, that Vince versus everyone guy, you'd probably like him. You can follow him on TikTok. Or if you can't join the live, you can always catch him on Facebook. You leave a comment there. He loves to read the comments. Thank you all. Have a good night.